Hi guys, I hope you're doing really well. My name is Sarah and welcome to What the Horror, the channel where we talk about horror movies old and new. Today we are reviewing Night Swim, the first horror release of 2024. Night Swim is produced by horror heavyweights Jason Blum and James Wan under their Blumhouse and Atomic Monster banners. It is directed and written by Brian Maguire in his feature debut and stars Wyatt Russell and Kerry Condon. I'll be honest, up front, this is 100% your standard January horror movie dump. We're on top form here, people. But before we get into the guts of the movie, I just want to say that I am still excited that we have kickstarted a brand new year of horror. That is always something to celebrate, right? So last year, we were hit with a curveball in the month of January with the release of fellow Blumhouse horror, Megan. I don't think anyone saw that one coming, audiences and creators alike, and it far surpassed the predicted earnings of its opening weekend and went on to be a box office success. So obviously, hot on the heels of that, we got the announcement of not only the Megan sequel, but also the production of Night Swim. Unfortunately, Night Swim is a complete return to form and failed to recapture the success of Megan both critically and financially. While Megan made $30 million on its opening weekend, Night Swim only earned $12 million, which is still fair enough, I guess. I mean, that's more than I've ever earned. Night Swim follows the Waller family, including wife Eve, children Izzy and Elliot, and husband Ray. Ray is a former baseball player who has had to retire due to being diagnosed with MS. Looking for a new family home, they come across the perfect house complete with a pool in the back garden. But things very quickly start to go downhill, and the Waller family begin to realise that there is something very wrong with the pool. I will be the first to admit that I haven't heard of many films about a killer swimming pool. But the problem for me is that while this is at its core a fresh spin, it feels so much like a story we've seen time and time again, and sadly, done far better. And I am convinced that the main reason for this is the fact that Night Swim is awash with nods to and reminiscent of other films. The one that stood out to me the most was Stephen King's Christine, John Carpenter's Christine, because of the dynamic between one particular character and the pool itself. But there were also moments that touched a little bit on The Shining, and one scene felt lifted out of it. If you've seen the film, you probably know which one I mean. Aside from that, the pool setting and dabbling with humans' fear of water tapped into both Jaws and Poltergeist. Poltergeist in particular because of the pool setting. And my mini-me, who I watched this with, also pointed out that there was a little bit of a Stranger Things vibe going on at one particular point, reminiscent of the Barb swimming pool scene in the first season of that. So it's just an endless list. Oh, and I almost forgot, on top of that, I swear there is a scene towards the end of this film that is lifted out of Scream 5. As well as Night Swim suffering from it losing its own identity in the multitude of influences of other films, I think it also tries to comment on one too many things. I'm all for both schlocky horror with no depth to it and horror that wants to add a message, to say something, but there are times where you can get too bogged down in the messages and the themes, and you can be trying to do too much. On the surface, Night Swim seems to be a film about humans' timeless fear of water, how little we know about some bodies of water and the potential dangers that come with it. But then as the film gets going, we've also got stuff about illness, strength, love, sacrifice, and weirdly, favoritism between parents and children. It starts out focusing on one thing, but by the end of the film and its resolution, we've moved on to something else that doesn't fully feel like it fits with where it began. Personally, I would have preferred it to strip it back. Sure, I will admit that last year's Megan commented on multiple things, such as parenting and over-reliance on technology, child development, and grief, but there were at its core the main 2 points throughout, which was technology and a grieving child. How it started is how it ended. Personally, I really love the setting of a pool and the concept of tackling the fear of water. There is a horror story within that for sure, as proved in the many, many horror and thriller films set in water. And I think that it's a great concept. I love aquatic horror so much. I will check out a film just because it has an aquatic setting to it. And I think despite there being a huge back catalogue of aquatic horror films, there's still individual and unique and original stories within that setting and genre to be told. And, to be honest, the biggest reason that I wanted to watch Night Swim, it didn't actually even really occur to me that I would be going into this just to watch a January release. I went into this thinking, cool, a film set in water, I'm down with that. And evidence that this can be done well can be found in the short film of the same name. You see, Night Swim originated as a short film, also called Night Swim. It was released in 2014 and written and co-directed by Brian Maguire and Rod Blackhurst. If you haven't seen it, it is on YouTube for free and definitely worth a watch. It's only about 4 minutes in length, so I will leave a link to that in the description box below. But it's essentially one scene from the feature film where one of the characters has a night swim. But this time it ends a little bit differently, and because of its shorter runtime, and in my opinion, lack of explanation for what's happening, I think that this makes the short film far more effective and far creepier. But, again, that's only my opinion. And this is what I mean by there is a horror story there, but less is definitely more in terms of this plot. Maguire apparently acknowledges the influences from other films on Night Swim's story, but he also credits his own childhood experiences. He has said that growing up in Florida, where lives generally are greatly affected by water in terms of, he gave examples of knowing people who had drowned, houses that were destroyed, and shark attacks, and that you come to have a, quote, fear and reverence for the water, unquote. Tapping into a genuine fear that people have is just grade A horror, because you automatically have that connection to your audience. Maguire said that when he was younger and he was swimming in a pool that he knew was small, he knew the measurements of it and what could and couldn't fit in it, he would become convinced beyond any doubt that, quote, the water was an abyss and something horrible was rising towards me from the depths, unquote. I mean, I'm with him on that one. I used to swim competitively when I was younger, and no matter how many times I would swim in the exact same pool, which was an inside pool, once I got to the deep end where there were grates in the floor, I was convinced that a shark would swim up out of the grate and get me. But once you add other plot points on and try to explain everything away, it loses its scare factor and its ability to cross that line and become a great film. Then, as well as multiple influences and multiple messages, we also have multiple sub-genres happening here as well. Not that that is always a bad thing. Some films do this really well, progressing through multiple sub-genres. But here, it just adds to the muddled feeling. As for positives with the film, because there are some positives here, I would say that my favourite aspect was the setting of the pool and what that allows them to do creatively. I did think the sound design was great because of the addition of and use of water in the soundtrack. So all of the ripples and the movement of people going through the water are just droplets. Plus, the sound of water is just pleasing in general anyway, isn't it? It also meant we got some pretty cool and creative camera shots, making use of the space both above and below the water. There are lots of underwater shots. Sure, they do end up being a little repetitive, but for the most part, I liked them. They're utilising this setting. And I like the pool itself. It's simple with no frills, just grey concrete, and I think that that works for the film. Night Swim is tapping into people's fear of water, but I think it's also got that there's danger in your own neighbourhood aspect to it. So making it look like a run-of-the-mill suburbia back garden and pool, it makes it easier for audiences to put themselves in the shoes of the characters. I also think that there were one or two moments of some pretty decent writing. For example, there is a moment when the children question whether they should tell their parents something, and they decide not to because they feel like they wouldn't believe them. We often question why characters, especially younger characters, don't go for help or ask for help, but considering the parent/husband doesn't believe the family trope that we so often get, it is perfectly believable that these kids wouldn't ask for help because of that very reason. Oh, and I also think the title card was pretty cool, but that is about it for positives. In terms of negatives, one for me is the characters and dialogue. For the most part, this film has these stereotype characters, the fish out of water children, the family versus the dad, and the worried mum who goes off to do research. You've also got the whole parent doesn't believe the child or husband/wife trope, which does, as I mentioned before, get used a lot and very quickly gets old. I understand that it's a story plot point, it's a tool to create certain situations, but it's at a point now where it's done so much that I think that we would be fine with family members believing other family members. I'd say that Kerry Condon is doing a good enough job. She's fine. I do enjoy her relationship with her children, but she is confined within that stereotype role that she's playing. Wyatt Russell is just too wooden for me in this role as the dad. Honestly, if this character, his journey within the story, the mum's journey in the story, there's a change within the character. The children's journey in the story, there's a change within the character. The dad Ray's journey as a character through the film, you could not tell me which is the point where he changes. The performance is so wooden that it just feels the same just consistently through the runtime. And the dialogue is at times so daft and questionable that I'm not convinced some of it isn't purposely comical. I'm not kidding. At one point, the dad, to his wife and children, says, "This pool is the best thing that ever happened to me." Unfortunately, another negative for me is the scares. There is a big over-reliance on jump scares and the thinking that a loud noise equals scary. And one scare in particular was used over and over, one involving the pool setting. And 99% of the scares were predictable and signposted a mile away. But I can forgive all of that if the film's antagonist is effective. But once we actually got a look at the villain, or at least an aspect of the villain, both me and my mini-me just laughed out loud. I hate to say it, but it doesn't look great. The pool aspect of the villain is far better in terms of looks. So that's it for my spoiler-free review, but I do want to cover a couple of spoilers before I finish, so if you don't want spoilers, that is your time to click off. But don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already before you go. Okay, now for some spoilers. Not many, but there were just a couple of plot points that I had an issue with and I wanted to talk about, complain about. First up, why are we still including animals in horror just to have them killed off, just to bump up the body count? I mean, honestly, as soon as I saw the cat cider, I went, yep, well, that cat's going to die. But while we're on the subject of the cat, we're taught further in the film that the water in the swimming pool is from a local spring and has magical powers. The water will grant wishes, but at a price. And that price is the payment of a life for a wish. The pool decides to grant Ray a wish and wants to take Elliot's life as payment. But the pool killed the cat earlier in the film. So wasn't that a payment of life? Wasn't that enough? I don't know, that just stood out to me as that doesn't make sense within the film's own rules and the law. You've also got the usual stupid decisions by a character, and the most egregious of this is when the daughter Izzy is having a little swim date with the boy she likes. They're playing a game of Marco Polo, and when things turn creepy, why does she keep her eyes closed? She's scared, she doesn't know where he is, yet she decides to continue wandering around the pool with her eyes closed. Why? And when she kind of opens her eyes and sees someone there, it is so clearly not the boy she likes. But while that is a negative, I suppose there is some enjoyment to be had in shouting at the screen at daft things characters do. We complain about it, but it is part of the experience, I suppose. And my final plot point that I wanted to talk about is the ending and the solution to the problem. We've seen many a possession movie and many an attempt at an exorcism, but I'm not sure we've ever seen one like this. I could be wrong, but when the dad Ray is possessed by the pool, it appears as though the way they save him is by saying they love him and telling him to come back to them. So now the message is not fear water, but make sure you love your family, tell them you love them, and don't sacrifice them to an evil pool, and you'll be fine. But then Ray does still have to sacrifice himself to save the rest of his family, so maybe not. This is what I mean by trying to say too many things. I don't know what the takeaway from this film is. Pool's bad, I guess? Look, overall, despite everything I've said, I didn't hate Night Swim. I was able to find things in it that I both enjoyed and rated. And if nothing else, it was a trip to the cinema to watch a horror film with my mini-me. So, you know. It's just that this is a perfect example of the January horror release and is a lot of what we've seen before. But maybe there is a place for these January releases. Maybe there is some sort of twisted comfort in knowing what we'll get and having an ease into the year. I'm a big advocate for not accepting subpar quality if, you know, and using that as an excuse. Low budget, so what do you expect? You know, I feel like there's so many low budget and not great movies that are made that are still good because there's passion in it, there's effort within it, and you can smell the difference between maybe a film not quite meeting its potential and just a cash grab. So, you know, I'm not saying it's okay to accept bad films. I'm just wondering if there is some sort of comfort in beginning the year, the holidays are finished, you know, you go watch a film and you kind of know it's not going to be groundbreaking. But in the screening I went to, everyone else there talked all the way through it and one couple walked out. So maybe that tells you something else. For Night Swim, I gave it 2 out of 5 stars rating on Letterboxd. Let me know your thoughts on Night Swim. If you've seen it, did you like it or did you think it was a flop? Oh man, I have snuck so many pool puns into this review. I've seen some half-star ratings on Letterboxd already, so I'm really interested to see what you think to it. And what do you think to January releases? Am I daft or is there perhaps an element of comfort in them? If you enjoyed this episode, then don't forget to give it a like and subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss out on more reviews. But in the meantime, thank you as always for stopping by. I really do appreciate it. Take care of yourselves and I will talk to you in the next episode. Bye.